I stayed up all night fixing everything they broke. I put my career on hold just to make them happy. I spent years hiding my own dreams so theirs could shine. I lent them my last dollar even when I had none. I cheered the loudest when they succeeded, even when I cried inside. I forgave every lie, every excuse, every broken promise. I believed in us when nobody else did. And then they left. After everything, they walked away like I was nothing, like I had never mattered at all. My name is Maya. I was 28 when I moved to Seattle fresh out of college, carrying nothing but a suitcase, a laptop, and a stubborn streak of ambition. I worked in a small marketing agency downtown, juggling multiple clients, late nights, and endless coffee runs, all while trying to climb a ladder that seemed impossibly steep. I had met them at a gallery opening 2 years before, the kind of person who lit up the room with laughter and charm. We fell fast, the kind of whirlwind romance that makes your friends suspicious, but your heart convinced its fate. First, it was effortless. We cooked meals together, binge-watched old movies on rainy afternoons, and made weekend plans that stretched into months. But somewhere along the line, the balance shifted. I became the one who gave endlessly, and they became the one who took effortlessly. I started noticing it in the small things. When I was exhausted from work, they expected me to be available at a moment's notice, yet their own time was untouchable. When I celebrated a career milestone, they barely acknowledged it. But the moment I stumbled, they vanished, swallowed by work or plans with friends. I ignored the creeping resentment at first. I told myself love was about sacrifice. I told myself loyalty meant patience. Then came the betrayal I couldn't ignore. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic at first glance. No screaming, no doors slammed. Just a text, a digital severing of all we had built. I think I need some space. Maybe we're not right for each other. That was it. Months of loyalty reduced to 19 words. And the kicker? I had rearranged my life, given up opportunities, made sacrifices, all so they could thrive, while they treated me like a disposable comfort. I remember sitting on the edge of our old couch, phone in hand, feeling a strange, hollow emptiness. My apartment smelled faintly of jasmine, the remnants of their last visit. I replayed every memory, every laugh, every promise. Did they even notice what I had done for them? Did they care? The answer was terrifyingly simple: no. The confrontation was inevitable, though I wasn't sure I wanted it. But silence can't always hold back fire. One evening, I found them at a local cafe with someone new. Someone who didn't know the weight of my sacrifices. I walked in quietly, ordered my drink, and waited. They smiled when they saw me. The same charming smile that had once convinced me to stay through every storm. "Hey Maya," they said casually. "I didn't expect you here." I sat across from them and let the moment stretch, letting them realize for the first time that I was present, unbroken but not bending. "I've been thinking," I said slowly, choosing each word like stones in a stream. "About us. About everything I gave. And what I got in return." Their smile faltered. A subtle shift, barely perceptible, but enough to make my pulse race. Not from anger but from clarity. I didn't need to beg. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. They were already seeing the truth reflected in my calm, unwavering gaze. That night marked the turning point. I stopped chasing apologies that would never come. I stopped making excuses for someone who had learned nothing about gratitude. Silence became my weapon, my shield, my statement. I didn't harass them, didn't send reminders, didn't plead for validation. I let my absence speak. I poured the energy I once gave them into myself. I took a new role at a company that valued my contributions. I traveled to places I had put off for years. I reconnected with friends who had watched me fade into someone else's orbit. Every step I took was a quiet reclamation of my life, a silent declaration that my worth was not tied to anyone's approval. And they watched. Word spread through mutual acquaintances, subtle whispers that they couldn't escape. "She's thriving. She's moving forward. She's unstoppable." The power balance had shifted without me lifting a finger. Where once I had begged for recognition, now I walked in rooms with my head high and people noticed. And the person who had treated me as replaceable? They realized too late that the loss was irrevocable. I had become a life fully lived without them. But the lesson wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. There were no public confrontations, no humiliating posts, no dramatic scenes. True revenge, I realize, doesn't require noise. It's the kind of quiet, irreversible shift that leaves the betrayer powerless, not because of what you did to them, but because of what you chose to become. For the first time in years, I slept without dread. I laughed without hesitation. I made choices without second-guessing. I gave my energy to people and projects that mattered. And in that silence, I discovered the most powerful truth. Dignity is louder than any scream. Self-respect is the quietest, most devastating form of victory. The mornings felt different after that. Not brighter, not lighter at first, but cleaner, like a weight had been lifted without anyone noticing. I started waking up without anxiety clawing at my chest. No more calculating texts, no more waiting for a response that would never come. I made coffee in silence, let it steam, and watched the city wake up outside my window. It felt like reclaiming territory I hadn't realized was mine to take. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into campaigns, strategies, and client meetings with a focus I hadn't felt in years. People noticed the change, too. Not the old exhausted version who'd bend over backward to fix everyone else's mistakes, but someone calm, assertive, and quietly unstoppable. Colleagues started deferring to me in ways they hadn't before. My opinions carried weight. My ideas sparked results. Every victory reminded me of one immutable truth. I didn't need their validation to matter. Socially, I started re-emerging from the shadows I had occupied for far too long. Friends who had gently warned me about the imbalance came back into my life. We laughed over meals, shared inside jokes, and drank too much wine while spilling secrets we had tucked away. I realized how much energy I had wasted disappearing for someone else's comfort. I was alive again, and the world felt wider, warmer, and more inviting than I'd remembered. I didn't reach out to them, not once. No calls, no messages, no casual "how are you?" inquiries. I watched from a distance just enough to notice the shift. The person who had once relied on my constant attention and patience began to stumble socially. Invitations that once came automatically now needed effort, charm, manipulation even. And effort alone couldn't compensate for what they had lost. Their world had quietly contracted while mine expanded. I remember the first time I saw them again in person after months of silence. It was at a networking event, just a coincidence, nothing planned. They were talking to someone, laughing too loudly, the same old charm, but the absence of me was palpable. I stood there, a stranger in their memory but fully known in mine. No dramatic confrontation, no verbal retaliation. I simply smiled politely, excused myself, and walked past. Every step I took was a reminder that their influence over me had ended. There were whispers. Mutual friends subtly asked, "Have you seen how Maya's doing?" I smiled, let the compliment float past me. It wasn't about gloating. It was about power restored quietly, undeniably. The energy that I had once given freely to someone who didn't appreciate it now fueled a life entirely my own. And the most satisfying part? The person who had taken it all couldn't take it back. Psychologically, it was fascinating to observe. When I had been present, I carried the weight of their ego, their whims, their insecurities. Now that I was gone, that weight shifted entirely back onto them. They had no one to prop them up emotionally, no one to fix their mistakes, no one to forgive them endlessly. And while they weren't humiliated in front of the world, the imbalance was glaringly obvious to anyone paying attention. Silent, invisible power, the kind that doesn't scream but changes everything, was now mine. I started documenting small wins for myself. A successful project, a promotion, a weekend trip I had planned alone. Each victory was a quiet signal to the universe, and indirectly to them, that I had moved beyond what they could control. Friends began noticing my confidence. Strangers noticed my composure. And slowly, the notion of replaceable dissolved in my mind entirely. I realized that it wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving everything to myself. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need acknowledgement. The real victory was intrinsic. A restoration of dignity, an unshakable sense of self, a life lived on my own terms. I became the person I had put on hold, the one I had hidden behind loyalty and patience. And the person who had treated me as disposable? They were left to wrestle with their own fragility. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the power dynamics had completely reversed. They no longer had the leverage they once held. Invitations they expected to receive went to others. Opportunities they assumed would be easy now required effort and charm alone, without my constant support. And the quietest, most devastating part of all, I was content, thriving even. Every step I took, every choice I made without them, reinforced the irreversible truth: they no longer mattered in my world. I remember sitting at a small cafe one Saturday afternoon, scribbling notes for a personal project, when a friend waved me over. We talked about everything: life, ambitions, the past. And as I spoke, I noticed a familiar figure across the room, looking in my direction. Their eyes met mine for just a moment, a flash of something unspoken. Recognition, perhaps regret, maybe even a flicker of admiration. But I didn't look away, didn't falter. My gaze held steady. I had become someone untouchable, not through vengeance, but through unwavering self-respect. That moment, fleeting as it was, crystallized everything I had learned. Revenge isn't about spectacle. It's not about making someone suffer publicly or loudly. True revenge is quiet. It is relentless in its subtlety. It shifts the balance without violence, without chaos, without the need for anyone else to intervene. It is the reclamation of life, of dignity, of control. And in that reclamation, the betrayer loses power irreversibly, whether they acknowledge it or not. The weeks turned into months, and life's rhythm shifted completely. I no longer waited for anyone else to define my happiness or my worth. The quiet victories multiplied. A promotion at work, a solo weekend getaway to the coast, an art exhibit I'd been dying to see. I did these things not to prove anything to them, but because I finally remembered what it felt like to live for myself. At first, the absence felt strange, almost unnatural. I had spent years molding my life around someone else's needs, their moods, their desires. And suddenly that mold was gone. I could breathe, I could expand, I could be myself without guilt or hesitation. Every decision was mine to make. Every opportunity was mine to seize. And slowly, I realized that the most devastating revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about flourishing where they had once assumed I would crumble. Mutual friends started commenting on the transformation. "You seem untouchable," one said casually. Another added, "It's like you finally woke up." And I realized they were right. I had woken up, not in the cliché sense of overcoming heartbreak, but in a deeper, quieter way. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, my self-respect. And in doing so, I had demonstrated the ultimate consequence of their actions, that they had lost the person who once gave everything for them, and no amount of charm or apology could restore that. Socially, I became selective. I stopped wasting energy on people who drained me or failed to recognize my worth. Invitations that once felt obligatory now became opportunities to align with people who truly mattered. And in this recalibration, the person who had betrayed me began to fade. Not with dramatic confrontations or gossip, but simply because I no longer allocated any space for them in my life. The void they left became irrelevant, a reminder of the cost of taking someone's loyalty for granted. I remember an afternoon at a cafe, one of those rare moments when the sun hits just right through the windows, spilling warmth across the tables. I was reading a book, completely engrossed, when I felt a familiar presence. I looked up, and they were there, alone this time, not even pretending the encounter was accidental. Our eyes met, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Recognition, a pang of regret, maybe even longing. But I didn't break my composure. I didn't offer a smile or a word. I simply returned to my book, sipping my coffee as though nothing had changed. That was the moment I understood the full impact of quiet revenge. I didn't need to confront them, didn't need to force an apology, didn't need to humiliate them. The reversal had already occurred. I had become untouchable through my own growth, and they had no access to the life I was building. Every opportunity they assumed they would have now passed me by. Every social circle they relied on had noticed my absence, and my flourishing. I had turned the tables simply by valuing myself more than I had ever valued their approval. Work continued to reward my dedication. Projects I had once undertaken for the sake of someone else's validation now yielded success purely because of my skill, my focus, my insight. Colleagues and supervisors noticed. Clients respected me. My influence grew quietly but steadily. And the person who had once demanded my loyalty found that they could no longer leverage my attention or efforts. The power imbalance had shifted irrevocably, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistent, undeniable personal growth. I began journaling my thoughts in the evenings, capturing the quiet victories and the small lessons that each day taught me. One entry stands out. I gave everything once and it was dismissed. Now I give to myself, and every bit of it is returned 100-fold. That line, simple as it was, crystallized the essence of everything I had learned. True revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about cultivating a life so rich, so grounded, so aligned with your values, that their absence no longer matters, and your presence becomes undeniable. Months later, I ran into them one final time at a mutual friend's party. They approached hesitantly, attempting small talk, attempting charm, attempting familiarity. I listened politely, nodded where appropriate, but never once gave a hint of the old deference I had shown for years. Their attempts at connection fell flat. The person who had once wielded control over me realized, finally and fully, that they had no claim here. I smiled politely, excused myself, and moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who owned their space completely. By the end of that night, I understood what lasting revenge looks like. It isn't about spectacle. It isn't about confrontation or public exposure. It is the accumulation of quiet strength, the irreversible shift of influence, the reclamation of life and dignity. I had lived through betrayal and emerged intact, stronger, unshakable. And they were now powerless to affect me in any meaningful way. As I reflect on it now, years later, I see the full picture. The lessons are simple but profound. Never undervalue yourself for someone else's comfort. Never sacrifice your dignity for fleeting approval. Boundaries are not just protection, they are power. And self-respect is the quietest, most devastating form of justice. When you live fully, when you honor yourself, the person who once treated you as replaceable realizes, too late, the depth of what they lost. I've moved on. I've built a life filled with people who cherish me, work that challenges me, and experiences that expand me. The betrayal no longer haunts me, it shaped me. And in shaping me, it handed me the most satisfying revenge imaginable. A life lived entirely on my terms, untouchable, undeniable, and free.